Let's review the supplies to make our Magpie Girl Art Quilt. First up, fabric scraps. I sort all of my fabric scraps by color and store them in gallon plastic bags. It makes it easier for me to locate fabric when I'm making backgrounds like those that we'll do for our Magpie Girl Art Quilt or for making scrap quilts. If you have an abundance of fabric scraps, I highly recommend that you fill just a gallon bag so that you don't overwhelm yourself with too many selections. Typically, when I make a Magpie Girl Art Quilt, I make a background with only one fabric color in it. I might add in a second color, but usually it's only a 1 to 2 color quilt. It makes a really nice background. Next up, tone on tone white fabric. We use this to create the dress that our girl will be wearing. This is a polka dot fabric and the other is a star print. Alternatively, you could use just a plain white. Next up is text print. I use the text print for the girl's body, her face, her arms. I like using text prints because they add some interest to the quilt. These are 3 text prints that I have designed, but you can find them in a variety of colors and styles. If you can't find a text print, I suggest looking for music notes. You'll need fabric to back your quilt. I usually use black or whatever I have a large quantity of. Lastly, you'll need muslin. I usually buy muslin in 90-inch or 120-inch wide. However, the 44-inch wide muslin will work perfectly. You'll need cotton batting. I usually use warm and natural or warm and white, but any cotton batting will work. You'll need a fusible webbing. I use Pellin 805, also called Wonder Under. You'll need bias tape, either double fold or single fold. We use the bias tape to bind our quilt, and I'll demonstrate how to use both of them. Next up are all of the embellishments that we're going to add to our quilt. So I store ribbon, lace, and crochet thread, embroidery floss in bags in my studio or boxes, color-coded, so it's easier to locate when making these Magpie Girl art quilts or other projects in general. Variety of lace, ribbons of all kinds, shapes, colors, crochet trim, rickrack, embroidery floss, crochet thread. Anything that you can stitch to the quilt is perfect. Buttons. I have yet to meet a crafter who doesn't have an abundance of buttons. Buttons in any shape, size, or color are wonderful. Costume jewelry. I keep large boxes filled with costume jewelry. This is just a little bag filled with strands of beads in a variety of colors. Some are plastic, some are glass, some are wood, there's wire. Anything shiny and pretty, I want it. It's beautiful. Next up, white lace and pearl cotton. So since our girl is wearing a white ruffled dress, I like to add a little bit of lace on there to add some texture. And I use pearl cotton in white specifically to attach the collection to her dress. You can use other colors if you have it, especially if they coordinate with the rest of your collection. But white is definitely an easy thing to acquire. And now all of the shiny baubles and doodads that you can attach to your quilt. Everything from broken zippers, strange little charms, fabric clothing labels, tiny little binder clips, pieces of metal with words attached to them, old keys. If you wander through the scrapbook section and see all the embellishments for scrapbooking, they would also work wonderfully here. But what we're looking to do with these Magpie Girls is to find the collections of odd little trinkets and doodads that you have in your craft room and put them on display. So everything from strange little safety pins, little pieces of strange jewelry from relatives that I have, old earrings, brads, fabric covered, some are brass, keys from cars and locks, pieces of old costume jewelry, shiny, all kinds of shiny things. Any shiny thing that you can get a hole through, we can put on our Magpie Girl Art Quilt. You'll need a sewing machine that has the ability to drop the feed dogs. Dropping the feed dogs allows you to do free motion stitching. You'll also need a darning foot or a free motion foot. You'll need a regular standard presser foot. And if you want to try making ruffles with a ruffling foot, you'll need a ruffling foot. I found my ruffling foot online. I made sure that it would work with my sewing machine. I highly recommend you consult the manual for your machine to find a ruffling foot that would work appropriately, or visit your local sewing store for recommendations. You'll need thread and pre-filled bobbins. I highly recommend pre-filling bobbins anytime you start a new sewing project. It makes it so much more fun to just sew and not have to worry about filling the bobbins. You want to make sure that you have white thread, black thread, and thread to coordinate with the scraps that you'll use to create your background. You'll need cutting supplies like a cutting mat, ruler, and rotary cutter, and scissors. You'll also need hand needles, since we hand stitch the doodads and baubles onto the ruffles of our girl. You'll need ironing supplies, an ironing pad or an ironing board, and an iron. You'll need a fine point Sharpie, or these are Pigma Micron pens. I use them for writing the sentiment on my quilt, so I use them to write onto fabric. I also use them to trace the pattern onto the release paper of my fusible webbing. You'll need to print a copy of my pattern. It comes with multiple pages, so you'll also need some tape or glue stick to assemble the pattern. The Teflon craft sheet or piece of parchment paper allows us to assemble our girl on a non-stick surface before we iron her down on our quilt. Lastly, a nice to have are quilting gloves. They have grippy tips which allow you to more easily hold the fabric and move it when you do free motion stitching. That's it for supplies.